This is a 31 Pearls production. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 79. In those days Uriel answered and said to me, Behold, I have showed you all things, O Enoch, and all things have I revealed to you. You see the sun, the moon, and those which conduct the stars of heaven, which cause all their operations, seasons, and arrivals to return. In the days of the sinners, the years will be shortened. Their seed shall be backward in their prolific soil, and everything done on earth shall be subverted, and disappear in its season. The rain shall be restrained, and heaven shall stand still. In those days the fruits of the earth shall be late, and not flourish in their season. And in their season the fruits of the trees shall be withholden. The moon shall change its laws, and not be seen at its proper period. But in those days shall heaven be seen, and barrenness shall take place in the borders of the great chariots in the west. Heaven shall shine more than when illuminated by the orders of light, while many chiefs among the stars of authority shall err, perverting their ways and works. Those shall not appear in their season, who commanded them, and all the classes of the stars shall be shut up against sinners. The thoughts of those who dwell on the earth shall transgress within them, and they shall be perverted in all their ways. They shall transgress, and think themselves gods, while evil shall be multiplied among them. And punishment shall come upon them, so that all of them shall be destroyed. Enoch Chapter 80. He said, O Enoch, look on the book which heaven has gradually dropped down, and, reading that which is written in it, understand every part of it. Then I looked on all which was written, and understood all, reading the book and everything written in it, all the works of man, and of all the children of flesh upon earth, during the generations of the world. Immediately after I blessed the Lord, the King of glory, who has thus forever formed the whole workmanship of the world. And I glorified the Lord on account of his long-suffering and blessing towards the children of the world. And at that time I said, Blessed is the man who shall die righteous and good, against whom no catalogue of crime has been written, and with whom iniquity is not found. Then those three holy ones caused me to approach, and placed me on the earth before the door of my house. And they said unto me, Explain everything to Methuselah your son, and inform all your children, that no flesh shall be justified before the Lord, for he is their Creator. During 1 year we shall leave you with your children, until you shall again recover your strength, that you may instruct your family. Write these things, and explain them to all your children. But in another year they shall take you from the midst of them, and your heart shall be strengthened. For the elect shall point out righteousness to the elect. The righteous with the righteous shall rejoice, congratulating each other. But the sinners with sinners shall die, and the perverted with the perverted shall be drowned. Those likewise who act righteously shall die on account of the works of man, and shall be gathered together on account of the works of the wicked. In those days they finished conversing with me, and I returned to my fellow men, blessing the Lord of worlds. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 81. Now my son Methuselah, all these things I speak unto you, and write for you. To you have I revealed all, and have given you books of everything. Preserve, my son Methuselah, the books written by your father, that you may reveal them to future generations. Wisdom have I given you to your children and your posterity, that they may reveal to their children for generations forever this wisdom in their thoughts, and that those who comprehend it may not slumber, but hear with their ears, that they may learn this wisdom, and be deemed worthy of eating this wholesome food. Blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all who walk in righteousness, in whom no crime is found, as in sinners, when all their days are numbered. With respect to the progress of the sun in heaven, it enters and goes out of each gate for 30 days, with the leaders of the 1,000 classes of the stars, with 4 which are added, and appertain to the 4 quarters of the year, which conduct them and accompany them at 4 periods. Respecting these men greatly err, and do not calculate them in the calculation of every age, for they greatly err respecting them. Nor do men know accurately that they are in the calculation of the year. But indeed these are marked down forever, 1 in the 1st gate, 1 in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 6th, so that the year is completed in 364 days. Truly has it been stated, and accurately has it been calculated, that which is marked down. For the luminaries, the months, the fixed periods, the years, and the days, Uriel has explained to me, and communicated to me, whom the Lord of all creation, on my account, commanded, according to the might of heaven, and the power which it possesses both by night and by day, to explain the laws of light to man, of the sun, moon, and stars, and of all the powers of heaven, which are turned with their respective orbs. This is the ordinance of the stars, which set in their places, in their seasons, in their periods, in their days, and in their months. These are the names of those who conduct them, who watch and enter in their seasons, according to their ordinance in their periods, in their months, in the times of their influence, and in their stations. 4 conductors of them first enter, who separate the 4 quarters of the year. After these 12 conductors of their classes, who separate the months and the year into 364 days, with the leaders of 1,000, who distinguish between the days as well as between the 4 additional ones, which, as conductors, divide the 4 quarters of the year. These leaders of 1,000 are in the midst of the conductors, and the conductors are added each behind his station, and their conductors make the separation. These are the names of the conductors who separate the 4 quarters of the year, who are appointed over them: Melkel, Hilamelech, Meliel, and Narel. And the names of those who conduct them are Adnarel, Yasasel, and Yalamiel. These are the 3 who follow after the conductors of the classes of stars, each following after the 3 conductors of the classes, which themselves follow after those conductors of the stations, who divide the 4 quarters of the year. In the first part of the year rises and rules Melchias, who is named Tamani and Zahe. All the days of his influence during which he rules are 91 days, and these are the signs of the days which are seen upon the earth. In the days of his influence there is perspiration, heat, and trouble. All the trees become fruitful. The leaf of every tree comes forth. The corn is reaped. The rose and every species of flowers blossoms in the field, and the trees of winter are dried up. These are the names of the conductors who are under them: Barkel, Zelzabel, and another additional conductor of 1,000 is named Hilo Yalef. The days of those influence have been completed. The other conductor next after them is Helemelech, whose name they call the Splendid Zahé. All the days of his light are 91 days. These are the signs of the days upon earth, heat and drought, while the trees bring forth their fruits, warmed and concocted, and give their fruits to dry. The flocks follow Enin. All the fruits of the earth are collected, with everything in the fields, and vines are trodden. This takes place during the time of his influence. These are their names and orders, and the names of the conductors who are under them, of those who are chiefs of 1,000. Gedayael, Kil, Heel. And the name of the additional leader of 1,000 is Asphael. The days of his influence have been completed. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 82. And now I have shown you, my son Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to your birth. I will relate another vision, which I saw before I was married. They resemble each other. The first when I was learning a book, and the other before I was married to your mother. I saw a potent vision, and on account of these things besought the Lord. I was lying down in the house of my grandfather, Malalel, when I saw in a vision heaven purifying, and snatched away. And falling to the earth, I saw likewise the earth absorbed by a great abyss, and mountains suspended over mountains. Hills were sinking upon hills. Lofty trees were gliding off from their trunks, and were in the act of being projected, and of sinking into the abyss. Being alarmed at these things, my voice faltered. I cried out and said, "The earth is destroyed." Then my grandfather Malalel raised me up and said to me, "Why do you thus cry out, my son? And wherefore thus do you lament?" I related to him the whole vision which I had seen. He said to me, "Confirmed is that which you have seen, my son, and potent the vision of your dream respecting every secret sin of the earth. Its substance shall sink into the abyss, and a great destruction take place. Now, my son, rise up, and beseech the Lord of glory, for you are faithful, that a remnant may be left upon earth, and that he would not wholly destroy it. My son, all this calamity upon earth comes down from heaven. Upon earth shall there be a great destruction." Then I arose, prayed, and entreated, and wrote down my prayer for the generations of the world, explaining everything to my son Methuselah. When I went down below, and looking up to heaven, beheld the sun proceeding from the east, the moon descending to the west, a few scattered stars, and everything which God has known from the beginning, I blessed the Lord of judgment, and magnified him, because he hath set forth the sun from the chambers of the east, that, ascending and rising in the face of heaven, it might spring up, and pursue the path which has been pointed out to it. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 83. I lifted up my hands in righteousness, and blessed the Holy and the Great One. I spoke with the breath of my mouth, and with the tongue of flesh, which God has formed for all the sons of mortal men. that with it they may speak, giving them breath, a mouth, and a tongue to converse with. Blessed are you, O Lord, the King, great and powerful in your greatness, Lord of all the creatures of heaven, King of kings, God of the whole world, whose reign, whose kingdom, and whose majesty endure forever and ever. From generation to generation shall your dominion exist. All the heavens are your throne forever, and all the earth your footstool forever and forever. For you have made them, and over all you reign. No act whatsoever exceeds your power. With your wisdom is unchangeable, nor from your throne, and from your presence is it ever averted. You know all things, see and hear them, nor is anything concealed from you. For you perceive all things. The angels of your heavens have transgressed, and on mortal flesh shall your wrath remain until the day of the great judgment. Now then, O God, Lord and mighty King, I entreat you, and beseech you to grant my prayer, that a posterity may be left to me on earth, and that the whole human race may not perish, that the earth may not be left destitute, and destruction take place forever. O my Lord, let the race perish from off the earth which has offended you, but a righteous and upright race establish for a posterity forever. Hide not your face, O Lord, from the prayer of your servant. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 84. After this I saw another dream, and explained it all to you, my son. Enoch arose, and said to his son Methuselah, To you, my son, will I speak. Hear my word, and incline your ear to the visionary dream of your father. Before I married your mother Edna, I saw a vision on my bed. And behold, a cow sprung forth from the earth, and this cow was white. Afterwards a female heifer sprung forth, and with it another heifer. One of them was black, and one was red. The black heifer then struck the red one, and pursued it over the earth. From that period I could see nothing more of the red heifer, but the black one increased in bulk, and a female heifer came with him. After this I saw that many cows proceeded forth, resembling him and following after him. The first female young one also went out in the presence of the first cow, and sought the red heifer, but found him not. And she lamented with a great lamentation while she was seeking him. Then I looked until that first cow came to her, from which time she became silent, and ceased to lament. Afterwards she calved another white cow, and again calved many cows and black heifers. In my sleep also I perceived a white bull, which in like manner grew, and became a large white bull. After him many white cows came forth resembling him, and they began to calve many other white cows, which resembled them and followed each other. Ethiopian Enoch, Chapter 85. Again I looked attentively, while sleeping, and surveyed heaven above. And behold, a single star fell from heaven, which, being raised up, ate and fed among those cows. After that I perceived other large and black cows, and behold, all of them changed their stalls and pastures, while their young began to lament one with another. Again I looked in my vision and surveyed heaven, when behold I saw many stars which descended and projected themselves from heaven to where the first star was, into the midst of those young ones, while the cows were with them, feeding in the midst of them. I looked at and observed them, when behold, they all acted after the manner of horses and began to approach the young cows, all of whom became pregnant, and brought forth elephants, camels, and asses. At these all the cows were alarmed and terrified, when they began biting with their teeth, swallowing, and striking with their horns. They began also to devour the cows. And behold, all the children of the earth trembled, shook with terror at them, and suddenly fled away. Ethiopian Enoch Chapter 86. Again I perceived them, when they began to strike and to swallow each other, and the earth cried out. Then I raised my eyes a second time towards heaven, and saw in a vision that, behold, there came forth from heaven, as it were, the likeness of white men. One came forth from thence, and 3 with him. Those 3, who came forth last, seized me by my hand, and raising me up from the generations of the earth, elevated me to a high station. Then they showed me a lofty tower on the earth, while every hill became diminished. And they said, Remain here until you perceive what shall come upon those elephants, camels, and asses, upon the stars, and upon all the cows. Ethiopian Enoch Chapter 87. Then I looked at that one of the 4 white men who came forth first. He seized the first star which fell down from heaven, and binding it hand and foot, he cast it into a valley narrow, deep, stupendous, and gloomy. Then one of them drew his sword, and gave it to the elephants, camels, and asses, who began to strike each other, and the whole earth shook on account of them. And when I looked in the vision, behold, one of those 4 angels who came forth, hurled from heaven, collected together, and took all the great stars, whose form partly resembles that of horses, and binding them all hand and foot, cast them into the cavities of the earth. Ethiopian Enoch Chapter 88. Then one of those 4 went to the white cows, and taught them a mystery. While the cow was trembling, it was born and became a man, and fabricated for himself a large ship. In this he dwelt, and 3 cows dwelt with him in that ship, which covered them. Again I lifted up my eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof. Above it were 7 cataracts, which poured forth on a certain village much water. Again I looked, and behold, there were fountains open on the earth in that large village. The water began to boil up, and rose over the earth, so that the village was not seen, while its whole soil was covered with water. Much water was over it, darkness and clouds. Then I surveyed the height of this water, and it was elevated above the village. It flowed over the village, and stood higher than the earth. Then all the cows which were collected there, while I looked on them, were drowned, swallowed up, and destroyed in the water. But the ship floated above it. All the cows, the elephants, the camels, and the asses were drowned on the earth, and all cattle, nor could I perceive them. Neither were they able to get out, but perished and sunk into the deep. Again I looked in the vision until those cataracts from that lofty roof were removed, and the fountains of the earth became equalized, while other depths were opened, into which the water began to descend, until the dry ground appeared. the ship remained on the earth, the darkness receded, and it became light. Then the white cow, which became a man, went out of the ship, and the 3 cows with him. One of the 3 cows was white, resembling that cow. One of them was red as blood, and one of them was black. And the white cow left them. Then began wild beasts and birds to bring forth, of all these different kinds, assembled together, lions, tigers, wolves, dogs, wild boars, foxes, rabbits, and the hanzar, the sisset, the avist, kites, the fonkas, and ravens. Then the white cow was born in the midst of them. And they began to bite each other, when the white cow, which was born in the midst of them, brought forth a wild ass and a white cow at the same time, and after that many wild asses. Then the white cow which was born brought forth a black wild sow and a white sheep. The wild sow also brought forth many swine. And that sheep brought forth 12 sheep. When those 12 sheep grew up, they delivered one of them to the asses. Again those asses delivered that sheep to the wolves, and he grew up in the midst of them. Then the Lord brought the 11 other sheep, that they might dwell and feed with him in the midst of the wolves. They multiplied, and there was abundance of pasture for them. But the wolves began to frighten and oppress them, while they destroyed their young ones. And they left their young in torrents of deep water. Now the sheep began to cry out on account of their young, and fled for refuge to their Lord. One, however, which was saved, escaped, and went away to the wild asses. I beheld the sheep moaning, crying, and petitioning their Lord with all their might, until the Lord of the sheep descended at their voice from his lofty habitation, went to them, and inspected them. He called to that sheep which had secretly stolen away from the wolves, and told him to make the wolves understand that they were not to touch the sheep. Then that sheep went to the wolves with the word of the Lord, when another met him and proceeded with him. Both of them together entered the dwelling of the wolves, and conversing with them made them understand that thenceforwards they were not to touch the sheep. Afterwards I perceived the wolves greatly prevailing over the sheep with their whole force. The sheep cried out, and their Lord came to them. He began to strike the wolves, who commenced a grievous lamentation. But the sheep were silent, nor did from that time did they cry out. I looked at them until they departed from the wolves. The eyes of the wolves were blind, who went out and followed them with all their might. But the Lord of the sheep proceeded with them and conducted them. All his sheep followed him. His countenance was terrific and splendid, and glorious was his aspect. Yet the wolves began to follow the sheep, until they overtook them in a certain lake of water. Then that lake became divided, the water standing up on both sides before their face. And while their Lord was conducting them, he placed himself between them and the wolves. The wolves, however, perceived not the sheep, but went into the midst of the lake, following them, and running after them into the lake of water. But when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to fly from before his face. Then the water of the lake returned, and that suddenly according to its nature. It became full, and was raised up, until it covered the wolves. And I saw that all of them which had followed the sheep perished, and were drowned. But the sheep passed over this water, proceeding to a wilderness, which was without both water and grass. And they began to open their eyes and to see. Then I beheld the Lord of the sheep inspecting them and giving them water and grass. The sheep already mentioned was proceeding with them and conducting them. And when he had ascended the top of the lofty rock, the Lord of the sheep sent him to them. Afterwards I perceived their Lord standing before them, with an aspect terrific and severe, and when they all beheld him, they were frightened at his countenance. All of them were alarmed and trembled. They cried out after that sheep, and to the other sheep who had been with him, and who was in the midst of them, saying, We are not able to stand before our Lord, or to look upon him. Then that sheep, who conducted them, went away, and ascended the top of the rock, when the rest of the sheep began to grow blind, and to wander from the path which he had shown them, but he knew it not. Their Lord, however, was moved with great indignation against them, and when that sheep had learned what had happened, he descended from the top of the rock, and coming to them found that there were many which had become blind, and had wandered from his path. As soon as they beheld him, they feared, and trembled at his presence, and became desirous of returning to their fold. Then that sheep, taking with him other sheep, went to those which had wandered, and afterwards began to kill them. They were terrified at his countenance. Then he caused those which had wandered to return, who went back to their fold. I likewise saw there in the vision that this sheep became a man, built a house for the Lord of the sheep, and made them all stand in the house. I perceived also that the sheep which proceeded to meet this sheep, their conductor, died. I saw too that all the great sheep perished, while smaller ones rose up in their place, entered into a pasture, and approached a river of water. Then that sheep, their conductor, who became a man, was separated from them and died. All the sheep sought after him, and cried for him with bitter lamentation. I saw likewise that they ceased to cry after that sheep, and passed over the river of water, and that there arose other sheep, all of whom conducted them instead of those who were dead, and who had previously conducted them. Then I saw that the sheep entered into a goodly place, and a territory delectable and glorious. I also saw that they became satiated, that their house was in the midst of a delectable territory, and that sometimes their eyes were opened, and that sometimes they were blind, until another sheep arose and conducted them. He brought them all back, and their eyes were opened. Then dogs, foxes, and wild boars began to devour them, until again another sheep arose, the master of the flock, one of themselves, a ram, to conduct them. This ram began to butt on every side those dogs, foxes, and wild boars until they all perished. And that sheep opened his eyes, and saw the ram in the midst of them, who had laid aside his glory. And he began to strike the sheep, treading upon them, and behaving himself without dignity. Then their Lord sent the former sheep again to a still different sheep, and raised him up to be a ram, and to conduct them instead of that sheep who had laid aside his glory. Going therefore to him, and conversing with him alone, he raised up that ram, and made him a prince and leader of the flock. All the time that the dogs troubled the sheep, the first ram paid respect to this latter ram. Then the latter ram arose, and fled away from before his face. And I saw that those dogs caused the first ram to fall. But the latter ram arose, and conducted the smaller sheep. That ram likewise begat many sheep, and died. Then there was a smaller sheep, a ram, instead of him, which became a prince and leader, conducting the flock. And the sheep increased in size and multiplied. And all the dogs, foxes, and wild boars feared, and fled away from him. That ram also struck and killed all the wild beasts, so that they could not again prevail in the midst of the sheep, nor at any time ever snatch them away. And that house was made large and wide, a lofty tower being built upon it by the sheep, for the lord of the sheep. The house was low, but the tower was elevated and very high. Then the lord of the sheep stood upon that tower, and caused a full table to approach before him. Again I saw that those sheep wandered, and went various ways, forsaking that their house, and that their lord called to some among them, whom he sent to them. But these the sheep began to kill. And when one of them was saved from slaughter, he leaped, and cried out against those who were desirous of killing him. But the lord of the sheep delivered him from their hands, and made him ascend to him, and remain with him. He sent also many others to them, to testify, and with lamentations to exclaim against them. Again I saw, when some of them forsook the house of their lord, and his tower, wandering on all sides, and growing blind. I saw that the lord of the sheep made a great slaughter among them in their pasture, until they cried out to him, in consequence of that slaughter. Then he departed from the place of his habitation, and left them in the power of the lions, tigers, wolves, and the zebt, and in the power of foxes and of every beast. And the wild beasts began to tear them. I saw too, that he forsook the house of their fathers, and their tower, giving them all into the power of lions, to tear and devour them, into the power of every beast. Then I began to cry out with all my might, imploring the lord of the sheep, and showing him how the sheep were devoured by all the beasts of prey. But he looked on in silence, rejoicing that they were devoured, swallowed up, and carried off, and leaving them in the power of every beast for food. He called also 70 shepherds, and resigned them to the care of the sheep, that they might overlook them, saying to them and to their associates, Every one of you henceforwards overlook the sheep, and whatsoever I command you, do, and I will deliver them to you numbered. I will tell you which of them shall be slain. These destroy. And he delivered the sheep to them. Then he called to another, and said, Understand, and watch everything which the shepherds shall do to these sheep, for many more of them shall perish than I have commanded. Of every excess and slaughter which the shepherds shall commit, there shall be an account, as how many may have perished by my command, and how many they may have destroyed of their own heads. Of all the destruction brought about by each of the shepherds there shall be an account, and according to the number I will cause a recital to be made before me, how many they have destroyed of their own heads, and how many they have delivered up to destruction, that I may have this testimony against them, that I may know all their proceedings, and that, delivering the sheep to them, I may see what they will do, whether they will act as I have commanded them or not. Of this, however, they shall be ignorant, neither shall you make any explanation to them, neither shall you reprove them, but there shall be an account of all the destruction done by them in their respective seasons. Then they began to kill and destroy more than it was commanded them. And they left the sheep in the power of the lions, so that very many of them were devoured and swallowed up by lions and tigers, and wild boars preyed upon them. That tower they burnt, and overthrew that house. Then I grieved extremely on account of the tower, and because the house of the sheep was overthrown. Neither was I afterwards able to perceive whether they again entered that house. The shepherds likewise, and their associates, delivered them to all the wild beasts, that they might devour them. Each of them in his season, according to his number, was delivered up. Each of them, one with another, was described in a book. How many of them, one with another, were destroyed in a book. More, however, than was ordered, every shepherd killed and destroyed. Then I began to weep, and was greatly indignant on account of the sheep. In like manner also I saw in the vision him who wrote, how he wrote down one, destroyed by the shepherds every day. He ascended, remained, and exhibited each of his books to the Lord of the sheep, containing all that which they had done, and all which each of them had made away with, and all which they had delivered up to destruction. He took the book up in his hands and read it, sealed it, and deposited it. After this I saw shepherds overlooking for 12 hours. And behold, 3 of the sheep departed, arrived, went in, and began building all which was fallen down of that house. But the wild boars hindered them, although they prevailed not. Again they began to build as before, and raised up that tower, which was called a lofty tower. And again they began to place before the tower a table, with every impure and unclean kind of bread upon it. Moreover also all the sheep were blind, and could not see, as were the shepherds likewise. Thus they were delivered up to the shepherds for great destruction, who trod them under foot, and devoured them. Yet was their Lord silent, until all the sheep in the field were destroyed. The shepherds and the sheep were all mixed together, but they did not save them from the power of the beasts. Then he who wrote the book ascended, exhibited it, and read it at the residence of the Lord of the sheep. He petitioned for them, and prayed, pointing out every act of the shepherds, and testifying before him against them all. Then, taking the book, he deposited it with him, and departed.